Okay, so day 18 is getting crazier. We have a lot of geopolitical moves. We have Elon actually saying that we're literally sleepwalking into World War III. There's a lot of news, a lot of updates, a lot's going on. But before we go through all of this geopolitical analysis, all the news and all the updates, I have to answer the question that all of you have been asking me for the past 24 hours. What's going on with the ground operation? Why has Israel not entered Gaza yet? What is the holdup? Well, I can only speculate. I don't have the inside track on this, but this is what I think. Now, you have to understand the sources of this thing and how it played out. In 2005, Israel basically stepped out of Gaza and it, literally tore apart all the settlements and gave 100% of Gaza, the historic Gaza, whatever that was actually there, to the Palestinian Authority. And he basically said, look, it's your problem now. You govern Gaza. We're out. It's a very different scenario to what's going on the West Bank, where Israel hadn't really pulled out of the entire 100% of the West Bank, but that's a story for a different video. But then, a year into this kind of arrangement, Hamas actually took over Gaza and started making Israel life a living hell. So in 2008, after 3 years of skirmishes with Hamas and terrorist attacks and all that stuff, Israel decides to step foot into Gaza again and fix it. So they step foot in, they go all the way to the ocean, they literally take Gaza over in 2008. But they decide they don't want to take apart Hamas because they want to keep it as a counterforce to the Palestinian Authority, to weaken it. Now, in hindsight, we know it's a horrible decision, but that's what they decided in 2008. Now, in that operation in 2008, they lost 10 men. Now, 6 years later, fast forward to 2014, it gets worse. Hamas becomes stronger, it becomes more annoying. Israel decides to go in again and fix it up again. Now, this time, it's a very limited operation to try and kind of fix it on a more strategic local space. They don't even try to get all the way to the ocean because at that point, it's a very, very long task. And they just go strategically in the different kind of outskirts of Gaza. They lose 7 times more people than the first 2008 operation. 70 killed in action in that operation. Now, they decide not to go after Hamas's neck in 2014 strategically for the same reasons as in 2008. And I know you might be looking at this saying, how the hell did they think keeping Hamas alive was a good idea? But that's what they decided. So in 2014, they basically say, well, we just went in there for a little bit and we lost 70 people. Screw that. We're getting out. Fast forward to 2023, where they literally now have no choice but to deal with Hamas and get rid of it. Now, the task is becoming much, much harder. It's like when you have a little sickness and it's easy to, to treat, and then you let it fester and develop, then you're looking at down the barrel of some horrific consequences. That's literally what's going on right now in Israel. So now we're looking at the problem of not 70 killed in action, which was horrible in 2014. Now we're looking at 10 times, 20 times more. We're looking at a situation where the enemy is much larger. Now they have 35,000 armed soldiers over there, terrorists, might I add. They're better equipped. There's way more tunnels. There's 200 hostages, which they have spread across this whole tunnel system, which is an absolute mindfuck when you think about it from an operational perspective. So you're looking at complexity of unprecedented proportions on a global level. I've interviewed an expert on urban warfare. This is the most complex urban warfare project he's ever seen. And I'll put a link to that video at the end of this video. You're talking about a massive death toll on the civilian side, on the soldier side. And this is like, also start thinking about booby traps, snipers from the rooftops, new Iranian drones, which Hamas has that can drop grenades and IEDs. You're talking classic IEDs, RPGs, Cornet missiles, suicide bombers that disguise as civilians, surprise flanks from tunnels you didn't know existed, lots of civilian death, hostages possibly killed. And you're talking about 40,000 people of terrorists that are hiding there with their AK-47s and grenades and all these really elaborate weapon system. So based on simple math, in the classic kind of urban warfare, you need 10 to 1, right? You need 10 of yours for each one of the hunkered down terrorists. With all of this complexity around, it's a Herculean task. And that's not a surprise that they're kind of holding back on this. Not to mention the potential of a regional war outbreak if they go in, because that's always an option. Israel currently at the heart of a massive global drama. You have China and Russia and Turkey and Iran on the one hand, not to mention Turkey is a NATO country. You have US and Israel and UK and France on the other hand. You have all the proxies of Iran, the Hezbollah, obviously Hamas, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, all the militias up there in Syria. Insanity might erupt if they go into Gaza. Not to mention the West Bank, which is filled with angry Palestinians who want nothing but to kill Israel. So this is a powder keg waiting to explode. So that's why they're kind of dragging their feet. Now, Hamas actually put out a statement today saying we got 35,000 soldiers waiting for the IDF. And think about it this way. When you have an enemy that has 0% of care for its own civilians, they have 2 million civilians, and all they think about them is 2 million human shields. So you have 40,000 people who are using 2 million as a human shield in a tunnel system, in a maze, in an urban warfare scenario with hostages. That's really almost an unsolvable problem. Now, Macron's turn was today. President Macron from France came over to Israel today after everybody else did, and just kind of reinforcing the idea of this new Cold War with the US, France, Germany, UK, and Israel versus China, Iran, Russia, and all these other guys. Turkey is kind of in between here, but it seems that Turkey is leaning more to the axis of the China and Iran and Russia. And then you have Qatar. Qatar, which is a classic agent of chaos, is just stirring the pot in every direction. On the one hand, Qatar hosts the largest military base of the US in that part of the world. On the other hand, it's openly funding Hamas. It's openly funding terrorist groups, extreme Islamist groups. Just to kind of give you an idea, Qatar was responsible for the Muslim Brotherhood, who basically overturned Hosni Mubarak in Egypt and got into power. But then the US actually kicked out their guy, Morsi, who was the Islamic Brotherhood, and they put in Sisi, which is a US guy. And yes, I just said Sisi, the president of Egypt, is a US guy. Google it. It's actually pretty well known. So Qatar is both fighting the US and fighting Israel and brokering the hostages situation and being an ally to the US. I've never seen a greater kerfuffle than Qatar in this whole story. Qatar is a complete agent of chaos. The hope is that, if you kind of take Iran and Russia out of this, then Qatar will kind of fall in line. But geez, these guys are absolutely whack. Now, let's move on to some other stuff we have today. So, the Washington Post is updating that the United States is getting ready to evacuate hundreds of thousands of U.S. citizens from Israel and Lebanon, mainly Israel, which kind of goes to show you where they might fear things are going. John Kirby, the top advisor to the Biden administration, is saying, look, we don't want a war with Iran, but if they step in, if they jump in, we will retaliate, which is a very alarming statement. Reuters quotes U.S. officials unnamed that Iran is seeking to escalate the conflict. You have the whole Saudi angle. Don't forget, Iran is trying to kind of get in between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the US. And if they escalate, it's going to be very hard for Saudi as a Sunni Arab nation to side with Israel, who is now at war with Sunni Muslims. That's the whole idea. The Wall Street Journal is saying there's a no fuel agreement that was kind of brought up by Hamas. Hamas said, look, we'll give you 50 hostages out of the 200. So we'll give you 25% of the hostages if you let us have fuel. Israel said no, according to the Wall Street Journal. At this point, I don't know if it's verified or not. I haven't seen an Israeli source talk about it. But if that is true, that means Israel is preparing for war. And if Israel would have been preparing for de-escalation, I think they would have given the fuel, right? So if you're preparing for escalation, there's no way you're going to give your enemy some fuel. So you have an Israeli minister, according to an Israeli source this time, saying there's the mission is no more threats from Gaza. Now, that sounds to me like we want to end Hamas. And we go back to the original point I made in the beginning of this video. That's a Herculean task of unprecedented proportions. And I hope people understand the complexities of it and the potential risks of a regional and potentially, God forbid, global escalation. We had a report from Turkey that Turkey is actually kicking out the Hamas leadership from its soil. The Turks denied it. I think it is true. I think Hamas is now a tainted, a radioactive brand. Even if people support Palestinian causes, Hamas is a dead brand. I mean, what they've done on October 7th is horrific. It's horrifying. It's beyond Nazi shit. So there's nobody on the except some crazy yahoos, wackos, that are going to support Hamas. The whole narrative shifted. The Palestinians, nobody's saying, "Oh, we support Hamas" anymore. They're radioactive. They're dead. Now, there's reports from the ground that the United States is asking Israel to delay their ground offensive because, and here are the different scenarios here, they're trying to get more hostages out. They're trying to put in more aid to Gaza before defeat hit the shan. They're trying to prep the U.S. assets around the world from potential attacks from Iran and their proxies. And in the New York Times, they actually said that the U.S. thinks that Israel still didn't present an achievable goal for their operation. Now, that may mean the plan is half-baked, or it's just too ambitious, or it doesn't limit civilian death. Whatever it may mean, it sounds like the U.S. is saying to Israel, just keep bombing from the air, don't rush headfirst into this ground operation, which sounds to me like a solid advice given how complex this thing is, as you remember in the beginning of this video. Now, here's the crazy part. Elon Musk came on a Twitter space yesterday and said, hey, we're literally sleepwalking our way into World War III. And if we're not careful, I think Elon is 100% right. If we're not careful with the situation, it may escalate like crazy. Because look at the north of Israel right now. At the north of Israel, we have ongoing battles between Hezbollah and Israel. But it's very limited now. Hezbollah shoots an anti-tank rocket, Israel retaliates, and it's basically contained. The speed at which this escalates into a full-out war, even though it seems like at this point at least, the Lebanese people are not interested in it, is quite fast. If this escalates, the speed at which Syrian militias or potentially Iran gets into it, the US gets into it, Turkey gets into it, God forbid. I mean, the speed at which this can go kaboom is very, very quick. Now, I want to explain something to you about Egypt. There's a play here being cooked. So we heard from the Financial Times that Egypt is getting paid for potential refugees. So this is not really confirmed yet, but it seems there's money going to Egypt to receive potential refugees. Now, if that's the case, it means that Sisi from Egypt might be playing ball with the idea of taking some of these civilians from Gaza to Sinai temporarily to allow Israel to finish its fight against Hamas. I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but in any case, Israel and the US have agreed to an ongoing humanitarian aid every single day to Gaza. And at this point, we can only hope it doesn't escalate beyond this, because now we're getting reports from Reuters that Hezbollah is getting a green light from Iran to basically not to go overboard, but to continue daily strikes against the IDF in a limited capacity. On the pleasant side, if you want some good news in this kerfuffle clusterfuck, the Israeli police chief is saying, hey, we had literally zero issues with Israeli citizen Arabs who are not doing anything negative at all, or participating or doing anything, which just goes to show you that Israel actually has its shit together with its Israeli Arabs. There's no issues going on. You would have seen riots and stuff, nothing yet. The Iranian foreign minister said that all options are on the table with Israel if they go too far. Again, their threats is nothing new. They've voiced them many, many times before. Even though rockets from Hamas stop for 12 to 14 hours here and there, they keep firing. They don't let more than 48 hours go by, between rockets to Israel. They want to keep showing the world that they're still alive. Because for Hamas to win this, all they have to do is just stay alive. If they stay alive when this is over, they win. Israel has to actually defeat every single one of them, which is, as I said, a Herculean task. Now, this is the updates I have for you. Now, I've made a whole 1-hour interview with John Spencer. He's the guy who literally wrote the book on urban warfare, breaking down what Israel needs to do in Gaza. That video is going to be posted right now, right here. Go click on it. If you haven't yet, that's my second channel. That's not my main channel. If you haven't yet, click right here to subscribe to this channel. This is where I do my geopolitics and my news updates. I'll see you in the next video.